from my perspective, I think it's almost good too, because hey, here's what we have for tour. We haven't even used them yet because we haven't needed them because of how good these have been. Yeah. So that's sort of the thing that's exciting to me. It's like we have all these different tour iterations because tour players are pretty unique in the needs that they have. Some guys like to hit specific ball flights, and it's easier to do that when you move around the mass properties of the head, mess with the CG locations, all that stuff. But like I said, both of these drivers in the standard shape, the standard model and the triple diamond, those have been what we've gone to because they're both very neutral. And that's one thing that we've seen with AI Smoke Triple Diamond. Triple Diamond's always been our most popular model on tour. But this year it started to get a little bit too right bias. We saw a lot of guys almost struggle to turn it over when they wanted to. Yeah. Obviously there are other guys that had a lot of success with it. Xander is a good example of that. But we knew we wanted to make that a little bit more neutral because Triple Diamond ball speeds have always been our fastest. It's our most tour played driver. They like the shape of it, all those good things. But we just wanted to make it more neutral. So if you wanted to hit a cut with it, or left or right, you could do that with the driver. If you wanted to turn one over, you could do it with the same driver. And it's just basically can fit both of those swing types. So yeah, that's been exciting. The technology in the face is great, the AI 10X Smart Face. We've actually really seen that be a big upgrade over the last face technology. It's for whatever reason, you know, I guess because we spend a lot of money in technology and AI and all that stuff. Yeah. But we've seen a significant tightening up in dispersion on mishits as far as spin and ball speed on off-center strikes. That's been pretty noticeable. The big surprise for us is the standard model. Okay. Really, because the AI Smoke Max driver head, you know, our biggest driver head, our most forgiving option, and unfortunately on tour we've seen it produce slower ball speeds than the Triple Diamond. So like this year was a little bit of a struggle because we like that head, players like that head, but when you show them a Triple Diamond with 2 miles an hour, 1 mile an hour more ball speed, it's hard to go back and look at that as a viable option. Sure. Nobody wants to turn down ball speed. Right. Nobody. So what we really challenged the R&D team to do, and a quick side story to that is the guy, Tim Reed, who's in charge of tour, has in the last couple of years now taken over R&D as well. So our R&D department has even more of a tour flavor than we've had in the past. Yeah. So when we give feedback like that based on tour player feedback to R&D, we take action right away. So AI Smoke Max head, really good, really forgiving, love the numbers. How can we make that faster? And that's really what the story is behind that driver. So the R&D department went through, I don't know how many iterations of shapes to really find something that was faster. You would swing it faster through the air. So aerodynamically, something that would get through the air faster than some of the other big footprint drivers that we've had in the past. So like I said, they went through countless iterations. What we've seen so far, and we've been testing with guys since RSM the third week of November, people are swinging that faster in almost all cases than even the Triple Diamond. So the standard model. The standard model. Wow. So the ball speed is neck and neck right there with Triple Diamond. So when you have a neutral head, fairly low spin, some adjustability back there, our biggest head shape that is the most forgiving, and then you throw in the same ball speed as our fastest driver. I mean, we have been so impressed with what we've seen on tour, where we have all these different tour iterations of drivers. Like I said, the Triple Diamond Max, we have a Triple Diamond Tour Draw, we have a Triple Diamond T. We haven't used any of those. We've fit guys, all 40 to 50 players that we've seen so far, into either the Triple Diamond or the standard model. And so, I mean, those other options are nice to have in case you get an outlier player that might need something else. But if we don't have to use those, that just goes to show you the performance that we're seeing out of those models is blowing away everything else. So
were the tour players surprised to see that too? Or what were they saying when they saw similar ball speeds?
Well, so the first thing they do when we tell them about that driver, and we say it's a bigger driver, so it maybe is a different looking driver than that you've played in the past, they set it down and they go, that's different. You know, I don't know if I love the shape of that. I'm coming off of a Triple Diamond or a Triple Diamond Max, so that would take some getting used to. And then they hit the first 3 shots and they're like, yeah, I think I could get used to that. And a perfect example of that is Kevin Yu, one of our staffers, he won Sanderson in the fall here, PGA Tour event. So he's in really good form. We fit him at RSM. We had a Triple Diamond Max Elyte driver that we kind of had apples to apples with his, AI Smoke Triple Diamond Max. We're like, all right, well, let's start with that one. 2 shots with that, wasn't as good. And we're like, all right, well, we want to try this because what we've seen so far, and at that point we probably had 10 players hit it. What we've seen so far with this is really fast, really tight dispersion in terms of spin numbers, and just very forgiving. And so the first 3 shots that he hit with this, and I wrote this down somewhere, the first 3 shots were within 5 RPMs of backspin from 1, 2, 3. Wow. Which is, I mean, it's hard to do. A robot can't do that.
Yeah.
And so when players start to see that and they see, Kevin swings it fast, he gets up to 182 ball speed, something like that. And when you're swinging it at that speed and maintaining that level of forgiveness and consistency with the spin, I mean, that's what got us so excited working with these tour players. And so, yeah, we have those other options and maybe at some point we'll use them, but the fact that we haven't had to, I think tells you a lot about these 2 drivers, which I think for retailers, that's probably a great thing to hear too, because those are the ones that we're selling at retail.
Yeah.
And so it's the same exact stuff that we're fitting tour players for. And that's exciting. I mean, what works on tour is going to find a way to work at retail. And this should be a fun one.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're in your tour lab here.
Yeah.
You mind if you put something together for us and show us what that looks like?
Yeah, I got a putter here. This is one of the new models, AI1 24. It's a shape that originally started with a sketch from me. I like this design. I've always liked putters at round edges with maybe some squared off lines for some visual stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so,
what's the inspiration of that? Because you helped design this?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the inspiration?
So some of the other models that I've kind of sketched up in the past, I've always liked rounded shapes that have some framing lines or some squared off lines for alignment, but I've always liked softer edges in a putter. And honestly, one of the guys that I had in mind when we were doing this and when we were sketching this up was John Rahm, who's used that Rossi for a long time, which, it's not my favorite shape, but I know what he likes about that putter. He's got the soft edges. He's not a very linear person, so alignment lines don't help him. His does not have the stripes on it, so
this looks like the rear end of like a luxury car.
Yeah, so yeah, basically what I wanted to call this originally was a Roadster.
Okay.
And couldn't get that name through legal. Yeah. And then we had other names. Then we went
to another
to
car company that you
yeah. So that was a struggle. So we came up with, I don't know how many names we tried to put through legal, and it kept getting bounced back. Wasn't going to work. We even tried Honey Badger.
Okay.
I think that'd been a fun name. But that didn't work. So it's called 24 for. Obviously, it was designed in 2024. I think Jacob, who's now the GM at Odyssey, said something like, Odyssey's been #1 putter for 24 years. I don't know if that's true or not. I think it sounds great.
Yeah,
I mean, we're #1 putter on tour for as long as I can remember, 24 years. That's good.
Right.
But it also felt like it was the 24th name we submitted to legal. So we're like, all right, well, let's just go with it. So, I've
very scientific approach in the name.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that, again, Rahm actually just switched into this putter. He was in last week and working on on some putter stuff, and I had sent him this one just because I thought he would like it, and he kept texting me. He said, "Bro, why do I like this 24 so much?" I'm like, "Well, I kind of thought you would because there's some similarities there with the Rossi that I think you would like." So sent it to him and been using it at home. Got it on Quintic in the Odyssey lab, and the numbers were, he aims it a lot better, which he's always had a kind of a left aim tendency and sort of pushed it online. Again, I don't really care what your tendencies are as long as you do it consistently. That tightened up his tendency, and therefore the consistency was a lot better.
Yeah,
so
cool. He's
like that. So hopefully he can he puts that in play for a long time and wins more majors with it, and that would be awesome. So
are you able to tinker for guys a lot too? Like if they come in with a putter and they're like, man, I'm just, I'd like to see this or I'd like to see that. How much leeway do you really have?
Depends. It depends on. Oh, my mic came loose. I'll fix that. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, you're good.
It depends. I mean, definitely relationships are important when it comes to that. You know, if a guy trusts you and trusts your eye and you've worked with them for a long time, then you have a little bit more leeway with what they allow you to do with them. But yeah, if they're struggling also too, they'll say, just tell me what you think is going to work best for me and I'll do it. So, you know, if they have some time to spend in the lab, then we'll get a lot of options together and make sure we're going through a bunch of different things. But yeah, there'll be some tinkering, and then there's other players that, sorry,
It's okay.
that don't want to tinker as much.
How much of your time is spent out on tour? Are you mainly here, or are you out on tour as well?
I'll probably cut down my travel a little bit more this year, but typically I'll go to 35, 40 tour events. So, you know, at least three times a month I'll be out at a tour event. So quite a bit.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. You know, before I came into this new role, I was the Odyssey rep on tour for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, something like that. So I'm used to going out there and traveling. Sometimes my wife likes to see me leave, and sometimes she doesn't.
Sure.
We've got 3 kids now, so she wants me home more often now, but she understands that, you know, my job is mostly out on tour. So, but yeah, there's a lot of travel involved, but it can be tough. But then when you get to an event, you realize, you know, this is a dream job. We get to work with the best players in the world and work on their golf equipment and help them try to accomplish their goals and dreams and do so well, you know, wearing a Callaway hat, working for a great company, and you know, it's easy when we have great product like we do to work with those tour players. So yeah, once you get out there, you forget about all the travel and the nights away, and it's just like, you know, we're working outside with the best players in the world in a game that we're extremely passionate about. So we're lucky to be able to do what we do on a weekly basis.
I'm always fascinated by how precise the tour pros are and how they know. They're basically human launch monitors, I always say.
Yeah.
What is there a good example of that you've seen where if something is even a degree or half a degree off, where this guy knows exactly what he wants and he knows that it's off too? Yeah,
it's you know, there's a lot of examples of that. I can't think of something particular. There's one thing that I feel like we've talked a lot about John Rahm, who, you know, is still very much involved in the Callaway family, and he plays all of our stuff. But you know, he recently changed driver shafts earlier this year, which he had played the same shaft through college all the way up until this year, which is, you know, you don't see that very often, especially a guy who's added a lot of speed and you know, sometimes feels can change. But he finally, again, this was another thing that, you know, Kellen and his coach convinced him to try driver shaft. So he came out here, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, made up probably 10 different shafts for him. And for him, he's so in tune with what he knows and what he likes to feel with the shafts, using the same shaft for so long. It would be one swing, nope, don't like that one. One swing, that's not going to work. One swing, that was pretty good. Another swing, okay, I like what we're seeing. And so that's ended up going into Ventus Black there.
What was he looking for? Why did he change?
So he's added a lot of speed especially in the last 3 years. But you know, he was somebody who was very against changing because, you know, he's obviously had a lot of success with that shaft that he was using.
He's been playing pretty well.
Yeah, and so he didn't really want to introduce another variable into that. And I think, you know, through his coach and him work a lot on biomechanics stuff and how he's moving and how fast he's swinging and things like that. So they're very in tune with, you know, what the number should be. And when they started to see, all right, you've gained, you know, 5 miles an hour of club head speed in the last however many years, it's like that shaft is not working the same way as it did when you put that in place. So this is something that I know you're against changing, you don't always want to do it, but this is something that we need to do. And at the very least, if it's not that, we check that off. But it was something that, you know, he was looking for just a little bit more stability very unique move and swing, as we know, very short, very quick here. And so everything's got to feel right to him. And he's very much a feel player when it comes to that. So You know, like I said, several different options that we tested, and you know, the first thing that's got to happen is it's got to feel right to them.
Sure.
And before you even get into the numbers and making sure the spin rate's working, how does that feel? Is there something there? And so that's basically, I guess, more feel, less numbers driven, at least to start. And then once we find, you know, something that's going to work for them, then we start looking at, all right, let's make sure the spin rate's in the right window and all that. So I would say in that way, he's the antithesis of a human launch monitor, because that's all feel-based, but he's so particular in what he wants to see and what he wants to feel that it's such a unique feel for him. He had one shot and he knows instantly that's not going to work for me.
Right. We're waiting for the epoxy to dry too here on this.
Yeah.
We're buying some time just talking. That part of it too is always interesting because, like you said, it's hard to get those guys to change, but Callaway wants to sell golf clubs and wants the elite players to be playing now the elite clubs.
Yeah.
What is that process usually like when Callaway does come out with a new line and you try to get someone like that to change and make big changes? Yeah,
it can be tricky. I mean, for us, we've always been a player-first company with our tour players. So we have a lot of money invested in them and in their success, and they trust us to put them in the right equipment. And that's the most valuable thing that we have out there is our relationships with our players. But yeah, at the end of the day, we want them in the new equipment as long as it works for their game. And we tell players this, whether they're been with us for a long time or we're looking at signing somebody, we're never going to put equipment in their hands that's going to make them worse or uncomfortable or whatever. And so I think we've seen that with guys like Sam Burns, who's played Paradigm driver for the last couple of years, Akshay Bhatia, who's played a Rogue ST driver for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
When they're winning with that and having success with that, in the moment you're like, that's great, and then 2 years later you're like, ooh, I wish I didn't love that quite so much. But again, we're a player first company. We want them to be comfortable, so we push the envelope. We come up with this new technology, and if it goes great, they'll switch into it. If they're not comfortable with it, we're not going to force their hand. We're going to work hard to get them into it because there are things about the new equipment that we know are going to be better. But if they're not comfortable with it, we're not going to force their hand. We want them to succeed first and foremost. But that kind of leads me into the next point here. We did something a little bit differently this time around with Elyte versus AI Smoke and previous drivers, where we wanted it to be on the conforming list sooner this time around than January, which is typically January 1, which is when we will have them on the list so guys can play them at Maui and Century and Sony. But we wanted to do it a little bit earlier this time around because we knew Sam and Akshay were going to be playing the Hero World Challenge Tigers event in the Bahamas. And so we pushed some models through the conforming list because we wanted them to be able to play it, because the early testing showed that it was working really well for them. They were really comfortable with it. And so we were able to do that, get it on the conforming list, and both of those guys switched into it for that week, which is huge for us. Those are marquee staffers for us. Again, guys that don't always like to change if they're not seeing something that's, way better than what they have. And so for them to switch this early on in the process with Elyte shows you just how great these drivers have been and how impressed we've been with the performance of them. So guys like that again, I think some people out there think just because we pay them, they're forced to play the latest and greatest equipment. That's not always the case. So we don't force them into that. So for them to switch out of 2-3-year-old product for that driver, it really excites us. They're seeing performance benefits and performance gains with it early on, and I'm sure we'll continue to work to dial it in even further with them. But for them to put that in play this early in the process, we couldn't be more pleased with what we're seeing with the performance, and same for them.
Over here?
Yep, we'll build this at 35. I'm going to see, probably put a 20 grammer in there. And the shaft, sometimes we'll like to counterbalance this, counterweight it.
The other thing, we were talking about tour players and making changes.
Yeah.
I always think it's funny because a lot of times those guys don't want more distance. They want to hit a certain window with launch angle, but they want to hit certain distances for gapping too.
Yep.
How do you balance that when like Elyte comes out and it's got tighter dispersion, sure, but you're also getting more distance?
They don't really turn down more distance off the tee.
Okay.
When it's there, it's a good thing. And
Yeah.
if they need to adjust gaps throughout the bag because the driver's going farther, they're more than happy to do that.
That's okay.
Obviously, when it comes to irons and stuff like that, that's where it varies quite a bit from retail. You're not necessarily looking for the most forgiving iron or iron that goes 10 yards further than last year's, because they don't need that. They're dialed in with their gapping.
Right.
They want consistency, they want workability, those sort of things. So irons is really where it differs quite a bit from tour to retail. But aside from that, with the drivers, pros are a lot like retail customers, amateur golfers. Give me distance, and that's the biggest thing. So
you say you cut that to 35?
35. Well, it will be 35 end of grip once we get to it. Yeah.
And you said that a lot of times for testing, if you need to make changes, tweaks, this is where you'll come. This is where the tour guys will get those changes made.
Yeah. If they come into the test center, which we encourage them to do, it's a lot easier to make changes here, and we have a little bit more of their undivided attention. Mm-hmm. This is where we can really get some good work done. We can do it on site, obviously at tour events, which is great because we're right there. We got the truck there. But they also have distractions of media obligations. They want to prepare for the tournament, get some practice rounds in, things like that. If we get them here for a full day or two, we go through combines here with them. So look at gapping and all that kind of stuff with the irons. If we have new product for them to test or new prototypes that we want feedback on, it's great to do it here. We can bring some of the R&D engineers in too to kind of talk them through that. And then, we go through things like performance reviews, basically is what they are, but they're trend reports. So we analyze all their data from specific time periods on tour, and we really understand, like, okay, what are you doing well right now? What are some areas that maybe we can address? Some of it's swing related that they would do with their coach, but if there's something consistent that we're seeing them struggling, whether it's, say, from 120 to 160, their approach, they're struggling to, front or back pin positions or whatever it might be, we have all that data that we track from all PGA Tour events. So we can really get in the weeds and say, okay, this is something that we can address here. Let's make sure the equipment is working well. And then if it is, then maybe that's something, hey, spend a little bit more time working on this when you can. Or, if the coach is there, that maybe they identify something that they can do better in their swing, whatever it may be. So we can do things like that here. So we're really, we've evolved more from just equipment reps to a whole performance team, really, and what we try to offer our players.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we saw a tour pro out on the range today, even just looked like trying new product and trying out new balls. And
that's Adam Hadwin. So he's one of our big name players. He's top 50 in the FedEx Cup, so he's in all the signature events next year, which is a big deal because that's where the money is, a lot of the money. So he's here working with us on getting fit for the driver and the fairway wood, the new ones, Elyte. He was Elyte Triple Diamond again. We're not really steering too far from that or the standard model. And then he had a fairway wood that was quite good. The standard model, adjustable, but watch him hit it off the deck, off the tee. I mean, that's such a tough thing with the 3-wood, to try to find something that does both. But again, that's something that came from tour feedback where our 3-woods have been good, but there's been areas where we think they can improve, and contact low on the face. We've seen that from a few of our players, which obviously that leads to more spin and just loss of ball speed, things like that. So we really took some inspiration from our Apex UW, which has been really a niche club on tour, but something that sort of replaced that 5-wood to hybrid gap. But it had a unique design on the sole, a step sole, which is something that we brought into our fairway woods, which has really helped with center face contact on our fairway woods. And we've seen that it's been early in the process. We got those later than the drivers, so really starting to get into that. But we're starting to see a trend there where contact's better, and obviously it's going to be more consistent ball speed, more consistent spin rates out of the middle of the face. So that technology, that step sole technology, coupled with that kind of tungsten speed wave that's moving more weight low and forward with that fairway wood, been really good. Chris Kirk is one of our staffers, fantastic guy. Love working with Chris. He's one of the guys that has struggled with our fairway woods the last year or two, and he's not always played, our latest fairway woods, but he's somebody who was one of the guys that struggled with that low on the face contact of the fairway wood, which drove him crazy.
Sure.
He'd hit one thin off the deck and it would spin up and carry 240 rather than 260 of what he was looking for. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And so we tested with him early on, one of the prototypes, and he was kind of asking if he could put it in play that day, which obviously we couldn't. It wasn't on the conforming list, and it was way ahead of schedule. But when we get guys saying, "Hey, I want this in the bag right now," we know we got something good. So basically, we've seen that now with the guys we've tested with. Adam had one today. Noah Goodwin, PGA Tour rookie on our staff, just graduated off the Corn Ferry Tour. He was still in a Paradigm 3-wood, and so we got him into one of the new Elyte 3-woods. First shot he hit with it, off the deck, nice high towering draw. He turned around and said, "Can I take this? Is it too early?" I'm like, no, you can take it now. So, so we're really 3 for 3 so far with the guys that we've fit this for. So that's an area that I thought our fairway woods could improve, and so far we've seen that from tour players.
Yeah. Well, that putter is finished.
Yeah.
I could sit here for hours with you, but unfortunately our time has come to an end too. We're talking all things tour with Joe Toulon here at Callaway.